The sound was sharper than a cracking whip, echoing through the pressurized silence of the first-class cabin. In seat 1A, a pregnant woman's head snapped to the side, her hand instinctively cradling her cheek where the red imprint of a hand began to bloom. The flight attendant stood over her, chest heaving, eyes blazing with a mixture of terrified adrenaline and unchecked malice. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The hum of the engine seemed to vanish, replaced by the collective gasp of 12 wealthy passengers. They thought they were witnessing a simple dispute over a seat. They had no idea they had just watched the end of the flight attendant's career, the collapse of her life, and the beginning of a corporate takeover that would shake the aviation industry to its core. The rain lashed against the reinforced glass of the terminal at JFK International Airport, mirroring the grey exhaustion that clung to Nadia Collins. At 7 months pregnant, her ankles were swollen, her back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and her patience was fraying like an old rope. She adjusted the oversized grey hoodie she wore, pulling it tighter around her prominent bump. To the casual observer, Nadia looked nothing like the typical clientele of Cloudwing Airline's premier first-class service. She wore no diamonds, no designer heels, and her hair was pulled back in a messy, practical bun. She looked like a tired mother-to-be who just wanted to sleep. And that was exactly the problem for Beatrice Gables. Beatrice stood at the boarding door of Flight 402 to London, her uniform pressed to military precision, her lipstick a shade of red that bordered on aggressive. Beatrice had been with Cloudwing for 15 years. She viewed the first-class cabin not as a service area, but as her personal fiefdom. She knew the regulars by name, knew their drink orders, and more importantly, she knew who belonged and who didn't. When Nadia Collins shuffled down the jet bridge, clutching a battered leather tote bag and breathing heavily, Beatrice's eyes narrowed. She didn't see the fatigue. She saw a disruption. She saw someone who had likely upgraded with miles, or worse, someone from economy trying to sneak a peek at the good life before the cattle call began. "Boarding pass," Beatrice said. Her voice was clipped, lacking the melodic warmth she reserved for the men in Italian suits who had boarded moments before. Nadia paused, fumbling with her phone. The screen was dim, and her fingers were clumsy. "Just a second," Nadia murmured, her voice raspy. "It's not loading." "Economy boarding is in 10 minutes, ma'am," Beatrice said, her voice raising a decibel, loud enough for the business passengers settling into their pods to hear. "You need to wait in the terminal until your group is called. You're blocking the entryway." Nadia looked up, her brown eyes flashing with a spark of irritation. "I'm in first. Seat 1A. Beatrice let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound devoid of humor. 1A? Honey, 1A is reserved for full-fare platinum members. I think you're confused. Let me see that phone." She snatched the device from Nadia's hand before Nadia could protest. Beatrice stared at the screen. The QR code clearly displayed first class, seat 1A, Nadia Collins. For a split second, Beatrice's mask slipped. Confusion warred with indignation. The ticket was valid, but instead of apologizing, Beatrice's ego hardened. It felt like a trick, a system error. People who looked like Nadia didn't sit in 1A, not on her plane. "Fine," Beatrice snapped, shoving the phone back at Nadia. "Go. But don't expect me to find space for that oversized bag. The overheads are reserved for paying customers." "I am a paying customer," Nadia said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her legs. She took the phone back, stepping onto the plane. "And I can manage my own bag." Nadia walked past the galley, feeling Beatrice's glare burning into her back. She found her seat, a luxurious, lie-flat pod in the front row. She exhaled, a long, shuddering breath, and hoisted her leather bag into the bin. It was heavy, and the strain pulled at her lower back. She winced, pausing to rub her belly. "Excuse me," a deep voice rumbled. Nadia turned. A man in a charcoal suit stood behind her, waiting to pass. He looked impatient. Before Nadia could move, Beatrice was there, materializing like a spectre. "Is she bothering you, Mr. Henderson?" Beatrice asked, her voice dripping with sycophantic concern. She placed a hand on the man's arm, effectively physically blocking him from Nadia. "She's just slow," Mr. Henderson grunted, pushing past. "I'm so sorry," Beatrice apologized to the man, then whipped her head toward Nadia. "Sit down. Now. You are causing a bottleneck. If you can't handle the luggage, you should have checked it. This isn't a locker room." Nadia sat. She didn't have the energy to fight. She just wanted water. She pressed the call button. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The cabin filled up. Champagne flutes clinked around her. Mr. Henderson in 1B had a scotch. The lady in 2A had a mimosa. Nadia had nothing. Her throat felt like sandpaper. She pressed the button again. Beatrice swept past, ignoring the light. She was busy fluffing a pillow for a man in 2B. "Excuse me," Nadia said, leaning out into the aisle. "Miss?" Beatrice turned slowly, her face a mask of bored disdain. "We are preparing for departure, Mrs. whatever your name is. Sit back." "I asked for water 20 minutes ago," Nadia said, her tone hardening. "I'm pregnant and I'm dehydrated. I need some water. Please." "We don't serve pre-departure beverages to everyone," Beatrice lied smoothly. "We're short on stock. You'll have to wait until we're in the air. If we have any left." Nadia looked at the full bottle of Evian, sitting in Beatrice's cart, not 3 feet away. "The bottle is right there." Beatrice's eyes went cold. "That is for the pilot. Sit down, or I will have you removed for failing to follow crew instructions." Nadia stared at her. The cruelty was so unnecessary, so pointed. She sank back into the leather seat, her heart pounding. She closed her eyes, placing a hand on her stomach. "Just breathe," she told herself. "Adrian will be here soon." Her husband, Adrian, had texted her 10 minutes ago. He was running late, stuck in a meeting with the airport's board of directors, but he was boarding last minute. He hated making a scene, so he usually slipped in right before the doors closed. Nadia hadn't told the crew he was coming. Adrian liked to travel low profile, but right now, low profile felt like a dangerous place to be. The cabin door was still open, but the atmosphere inside first class had turned frigid. Nadia sat in silence, her thirst becoming a physical pain. The air in the cabin was dry, recycled, and suffocating. She watched Beatrice laughing with Mr. Henderson, pouring him a second scotch. The injustice clawed at Nadia's throat. She unbuckled her seatbelt. If they wouldn't serve her, she would get it herself. Nadia struggled to stand, using the armrest for leverage. She walked the 3 steps to the galley where the service cart stood unattended. Beatrice was halfway down the aisle, her back turned. Nadia reached for a plastic cup and the bottle of Evian. Her hands shook slightly. She poured the water, the clear liquid looking like life itself. She raised the cup to her lips. "What do you think you're doing?" The shriek tore through the cabin. Beatrice didn't just turn. She lunged. She sprinted up the short aisle, her heels thudding against the carpet. Nadia froze, the cup halfway to her mouth. "I needed water. You wouldn't—" Beatrice slapped the cup out of Nadia's hand. Water splashed everywhere, over the cart, onto the floor, and soaking the front of Nadia's grey hoodie. The cup bounced away with a hollow plastic sound. "That is theft!" Beatrice screamed, her face inches from Nadia's. "You do not touch crew equipment. You do not steal from the airline." Nadia stepped back, shock rendering her mute. She looked down at her wet clothes, then back at the flight attendant. The humiliation was absolute. Every eye in the cabin was fixed on them. "I didn't steal," Nadia whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "I paid $7,000 for this seat. I am entitled to water." "You're entitled to nothing unless I give it to you," Beatrice spat. "I knew you were trouble the second I saw you. Dragging that trash bag in here, looking like you crawled out of a gutter. Who did you sleep with to get that ticket? Or did you steal the credit card too?" The accusation hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Nadia straightened her spine. The fatigue vanished, replaced by the cold steel of dignity. "I want your name," Nadia said firmly. "And I want to speak to the captain. Now." "My name is Beatrice Gables, the purser of this flight, and you don't scare me," Beatrice sneered. "And you aren't speaking to anyone but airport security." Beatrice grabbed Nadia's arm, her fingers digging into the soft flesh. "Get your bag, you're getting off my plane." "Let go of me," Nadia warned, pulling her arm back. "Do not touch me." "I said move," Beatrice shouted. She shoved Nadia. It wasn't a hard shove, but Nadia was off balance and heavy with pregnancy. She stumbled back, her hip slamming into the metal edge of the galley counter. A sharp cry of pain escaped her lips. She clutched her side, gasping. "Oh my God," a woman in row 3 whispered. "She's pregnant." "She's faking it," Beatrice yelled, though a flicker of doubt crossed her eyes. She covered it with more aggression. "She assaulted me. Did you see that? She tried to push past me." Nadia groaned, straightening up. The pain in her hip was sharp, but the fire in her blood was hotter. "You pushed a pregnant woman," Nadia said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "You have made a grave mistake, Beatrice." Beatrice, fueled by adrenaline and the terrified silence of the passengers which she mistook for support, lost the last shred of her professional control. "Don't you threaten me, you little—" Beatrice's hand lashed out. Crack! The slap was brutal. It caught Nadia squarely on the cheek, snapping her head to the side. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. Nadia stood frozen, her hand coming up to her cheek. Her skin burned, her ears rang, but she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She slowly turned her head back to face Beatrice. Beatrice was breathing hard, her hand stinging. She realized what she had done. She had assaulted a passenger, but in her twisted logic, she had to double down. If she admitted fault now, she was finished. She had to paint Nadia as the aggressor. She hit me first," Beatrice stammered, looking around at the passengers. "You all saw it. It was self-defense." Mr. Henderson in 1B looked down at his scotch, unwilling to get involved. The woman in 2A looked horrified, but said nothing. The cockpit door burst open. Captain Robert Halloway stepped out, a tall man with silver hair and a stern jawline. He saw the water on the floor, the terrified passengers, and his lead flight attendant looking flushed and frantic. Then he saw Nadia, holding her cheek. "What the hell is going on here?" Captain Halloway barked. "Captain!" Beatrice cried, rushing to him and grabbing his arm. "This woman, she's crazy. She tried to steal from the cart, she verbally assaulted me, and she threw water on me. I tried to escort her off, and she attacked me. I had to defend myself." Captain Halloway looked at Nadia. He saw the hoodie, the messy hair, the wet stain on her chest. He didn't see the swelling on her face. He saw a disruption. He had a schedule to keep. He trusted Beatrice. They had flown together for wars. "Ma'am," the captain said to Nadia, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Grab your things. I'm having security escort you off." "She slapped me," Nadia said, her voice eerily calm. "She refused me water, shoved me into the counter, and slapped me in the face." "Liar!" Beatrice shrieked. "She's lying, Rob. Look at her. Does she look like she belongs here?" The captain made his choice. He turned to the gate agent who was hovering nervously by the door. Call the police. I want her off the manifest. Assaulting a crew member is a federal offense." Nadia didn't move. She didn't reach for her bag. She just looked at the captain, then at Beatrice. "You really don't want to do that," Nadia said. "And why is that?" The captain stepped closer, using his height to intimidate her. "Do you know who I am? I am the commander of this aircraft. My word is law." "Because," a new voice cut through the tension like a razor blade. Everyone turned toward the boarding door. Standing there was a man who seemed to fill the entire entryway. He was wearing a bespoke navy suit that cost more than Beatrice's annual salary. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently absolutely terrifying. He held a leather briefcase in one hand and a platinum phone in the other. Adrian Collins had arrived. "Because," Adrian repeated, his voice low and smooth, vibrating with lethal power as he stepped onto the plane. "That is my wife you just slapped, and you are standing on my plane." The silence that followed Adrian Collins's declaration was heavy enough to crush bones. It wasn't just silence, it was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the first-class cabin. Beatrice Gables blinked, her mind struggling to process the information. She looked at the man in the navy suit, impeccable, commanding, radiating wealth, and then at the woman in the grey hoodie, disheveled, crying silently, clutching her stomach. The disparity was too great for Beatrice's prejudiced mind to bridge. "Your wife?" Beatrice laughed, a brittle, high-pitched sound that grated on the nerves. She turned to the captain, her eyes wide and pleading. "Rob, do you hear this? This is a scam. It's a coordinated scam. He's probably the one who helped her fake the ticket. They're grifters." Captain Halloway was not laughing. His face had drained of all color, leaving his skin the shade of old parchment. He was staring at Adrian, his eyes locked on the platinum pin on Adrian's lapel. It was a small, subtle W, interlaced with a wing. Every employee at Cloudwing Airlines knew that logo. It wasn't the airline's logo. It was the logo of Collins Holdings, the parent company that had acquired the airline in a hostile takeover 6 months prior. The internal memos had been signed by a CEO named Adrian Collins. The captain had never met the man. Collins was known for being reclusive and operating from the shadows. But he knew the name. "Sir," Captain Halloway said, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Mr. Collins, do you have identification?" Adrian didn't even look at the captain. He walked straight past him, his shoulder brushing Halloway's with enough force to make the older man stumble. Adrian knelt beside Nadia's seat. The transformation in his demeanor was instant. The cold, terrifying titan of industry vanished, replaced by a husband consumed with worry. "Nadia," he whispered, his hands hovering over her face, afraid to touch the red welt that was already beginning to purple on her cheek. "Look at me. Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" Nadia let out a sob she had been holding back, her body shaking. "She hit me, Adrian. She hit me right in the face. I just wanted water." Adrian's jaw tightened, the muscles bunching so hard it looked painful. He gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I'm here now. Nobody is going to touch you again." He stood up. The tenderness evaporated. He turned to face the room, and the temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You asked for identification," Adrian said to the captain, his voice dangerously low. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a black card case. He didn't hand it to the captain. He held it up. It was a Centurion black card, but beneath it was a corporate ID card with the Collins Holdings crest. "I own 71% of the stock in this airline. I signed the authorization for your pension fund audit last week, Captain Halloway. Do you need me to call HR to verify my biometrics, or are we done playing games?" Holloway felt his knees turn to water. "Mr. Collins, I had no idea. The manifest, it just said Collins. I didn't make the connection." "You didn't make the connection because you saw a black woman in a hoodie and assumed she didn't belong," Adrian cut him off, his voice slicing through the captain's excuses. "You assumed she was a criminal. You assumed she was a liar." Adrian turned his gaze to Beatrice. Beatrice was trembling now. Her world was fracturing, but her arrogance was a sturdy shield built over years of unchecked power trips. She couldn't accept defeat. Not yet. "So what?" Beatrice spat, crossing her arms defensively. "So you're rich. That doesn't give her the right to assault me. She pushed me first. I have witnesses. Mr. Henderson saw it." She gestured wildly to the man in 1B. Adrian turned his dark eyes to Mr. Henderson. The businessman shrank into his seat, suddenly finding the pattern on the carpet fascinating. "Did you see my wife assault this woman?" Adrian asked. It wasn't a question, it was a challenge. Mr. Henderson looked at Beatrice, then at the terrifying man in the suit. I was looking at my phone," he mumbled. "I didn't see anything clearly." "Coward," Nadia whispered from her seat. "He saw it," Beatrice shrieked. "You're all lying. She threw water on me. Look at the floor." Adrian looked at the spilled water, then at the empty cup on the floor. He stepped closer to Beatrice. She tried to step back, but she was cornered against the cockpit door. "You slapped a pregnant woman," Adrian said, enunciating every syllable. "You slapped my pregnant wife. Do you have any idea what you have just done to yourself?" "I followed protocol," Beatrice yelled, her voice cracking into hysteria. "She was non-compliant. She was aggressive. I am the purser. I am in charge of this cabin." "Not anymore," Adrian said. He pulled out his phone. He didn't dial 911. He dialed a direct line. "This is Collins," he said into the phone, his eyes never leaving Beatrice's face. "Code black at JFK. Flight 402. I need Port Authority police at the gate immediately. I want the airport flight operations manager down here now. And get legal on the line. I want a restraining order filed within the hour." He hung up and looked at the captain. "Captain Holloway," Adrian said, "you were going to have my wife arrested." It was a misunderstanding, sir." Beatrice said. "You are the commander," Adrian snapped. "You don't get to hide behind your flight attendant. You sanctioned the removal of a passenger without investigating the cause. You allowed a crew member to physically assault a passenger in your presence." "I didn't see the slap," Holloway protested, sweat beading on his forehead. "But you saw the result." Adrian pointed to Nadia's face. "And you chose to ignore it." The sound of sirens wailed outside on the tarmac, growing louder. Blue and red lights began to flash against the rain-streaked windows, casting a chaotic strobe light over the first-class cabin. "The police are here," Adrian said grimly. "Good. Because nobody is going to London today." The arrival of the Port Authority police was usually a chaotic affair, but the presence of Adrian Collins turned it into a scene of organized terror. 4 officers marched onto the plane, followed by a breathless man in a cheap suit, the airport duty manager. "What seems to be the problem?" the lead officer, a burly sergeant named Kowalski, asked. His hand rested near his belt, his eyes scanning the tense tableau. Beatrice saw her chance. She lunged forward, tears now streaming down her face, tears of fear, but she sold them as tears of victimhood. "Officer, thank God!" she cried. "This woman, she's deranged. She attacked me. And this man, he's threatening me. He says he owns the airline." Sergeant Kowalski looked at Adrian. Adrian stood tall, unbothered, radiating an aura of absolute control. "Officer," Adrian said calmly, "I am Adrian Collins. I am the owner of Cloudwing Airlines. I am pressing charges against this flight attendant for battery in the first degree and against this captain for criminal negligence." The sergeant paused. He knew who Collins was. Everyone in New York finance knew the name. "Okay," Kowalski said, holding up a hand. "Let's slow down. Who hit who?" "She hit me," Beatrice screamed. "She pushed me into the galley counter. Look, my hip is bruised." "She slapped me," Nadia said from her seat. Her voice was stronger now, bolstered by her husband's presence. "She refused me water, called me trash, and when I tried to get water myself, she slapped the cup away and then slapped my face." "It's her word against mine," Beatrice sneered, "and I have the captain as a witness." Captain Halloway shifted uncomfortably. He looked at Adrian, then at Beatrice. He realized his career was hanging by a thread. If he backed Beatrice and was proven wrong, he was done. If he backed Nadia, he admitted he lost control of his crew. I came out after the commotion," the captain said weakly. "I didn't see the physical altercation start." Beatrice gasped. "Rob, you liar! You were standing right there." "Officer," Adrian interjected. "We don't need to rely on the word of a compromised captain." He turned to the cabin. The 12 first-class passengers were watching with rapt attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian addressed them, "I apologize for the delay, but a crime has been committed. Someone here saw exactly what happened. If you stay silent, you are complicit in the assault of a pregnant woman. Who saw the slap?" Silence stretched. Mr. Henderson looked away. A young couple in row 3 whispered to each other but said nothing. They didn't want to get involved. They didn't want to be subpoenaed. Adrian's face darkened. "Is there not a single decent human being in first class today?" "I saw it." The voice was quiet, trembling but clear. Everyone turned to seat 2A. An elderly woman with silver hair and thick glasses was unbuckling her seatbelt. She stood up, leaning on a cane. She looked like a librarian, unassuming and fragile. "Ma'am?" the officer asked. "My name is Margaret," the woman said, glaring at Beatrice. "I saw everything. That flight attendant was a monster from the moment the young lady boarded. She refused her service. She blocked her path. And when the young lady tried to get water, that woman slapped her. It was vicious. I heard the crack from here." "She's lying," Beatrice shouted, her composure fully shattering. "She's senile." "I am not senile," Margaret snapped. "And I recorded the last 5 minutes on my iPad because I was afraid of what you were going to do next." Beatrice's face went white. You recorded it?" Beatrice whispered. Margaret lifted her iPad, tapping the screen. She turned the volume up. Through the tinny speakers, Beatrice's voice screeched. "Who did you sleep with to get that ticket? Or did you steal the credit card too?" Then the sound of a scuffle. Then the undeniable, sickening thwack of flesh hitting flesh. Then silence. The evidence was damning. It wasn't just assault. It was hate. It was discrimination. It was undeniable. Sergeant Kowalski looked at Beatrice. His expression hardened. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands behind your back." "No." Beatrice backed away, bumping into the beverage cart. "You can't arrest me. I'm in a union. This is my plane." "You are under arrest for assault," the officer said, grabbing her wrist. "Stop resisting." As they clicked the handcuffs onto Beatrice's wrists, she looked at the captain. "Rob, do something." The captain looked at the floor. Adrian stepped forward, blocking the path as the officers began to drag Beatrice away. He leaned in close to her ear. "You asked who she slept with to get the ticket," Adrian whispered, his voice ice-cold. "She didn't need to sleep with anyone, but because of you, the only place you'll be sleeping tonight is a holding cell." Beatrice was hauled off the jet bridge, screaming obscenities until the doors closed. The cabin was silent again. Adrian turned to the captain. Holloway was shaking. "Mr. Collins," Holloway began, "I assure you, I will launch a full internal investigation." "You won't be launching anything," Adrian said, "because you are no longer an employee of Cloudwing Airlines. You can't fire me on the spot. I have tenure. I have a contract. I have a clause in every pilot's contract regarding gross negligence and conduct unbecoming," Adrian said. "Allowing a passenger to be assaulted and then attempting to have the victim arrested constitutes both. Get your flight bag, Mr. Holloway. Get off my plane." "But who will fly the plane?" Holloway stammered. "We're fully boarded." "I don't care if this plane sits here until it rusts," Adrian said. "You are not flying it." Adrian turned back to Nadia. He helped her stand up. "We're going to the hospital, now." "But the baby," Nadia winced, holding her side. "The ambulance is waiting at the bottom of the stairs," Adrian said softly. He picked up her leather bag, the one Beatrice had mocked, and slung it over his shoulder. As they walked toward the door, Adrian paused by seat 2A. He looked at Margaret, the elderly woman who had spoken up. "Thank you," Adrian said. "What is your full name?" "Margaret O'Malley," she said, clutching her iPad. "Mrs. O'Malley," Adrian said, handing her a business card. "You will be refunded for this flight, and you will fly for free on Cloudwing for the rest of your life. My personal assistant will be in touch tomorrow." He didn't wait for a response. He guided his wife off the plane, leaving a stunned cabin, a jobless captain, and a power vacuum that was about to suck the entire airline into chaos. The sterile white walls of the Mount Sinai VIP suite felt like a sanctuary compared to the suffocating tension of the aircraft cabin. The heart monitor beeped a steady, reassuring rhythm. The sound of the baby's heartbeat. Nadia lay in the hospital bed, an ice pack pressed gently against her swollen cheek. The purple bruise had blossomed across her skin, a stark visual of the violence she had endured. But her hand rested protectively on her stomach, her eyes closed in exhaustion. Adrian stood by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked Manhattan skyline. He hadn't taken off his jacket, hadn't loosened his tie. He was vibrating with a cold, contained rage that made the nurses nervous to enter the room. "Mr. Collins?" Dr. Evans, the chief of obstetrics, stepped softly into the room. Adrian turned instantly. "The baby!" "The baby is fine," Dr. Evans said, her voice soothing. "The fetal heart rate is strong. There's no sign of placental abruption or distress. But Nadia's blood pressure is dangerously high. The stress, the physical trauma, it could have triggered preeclampsia. We need to keep her for observation for at least 48 hours. Adrian exhaled, a sound that was half relief, half fury. "Thank you, doctor. Whatever she needs. Money is no object." As the doctor left, Adrian's phone buzzed. It had been buzzing non-stop for an hour. He finally pulled it out. It was his chief of PR, Sarah Jenkins. "Adrian, don't hang up!" Sarah's voice was breathless. "Have you seen the internet?" "I've been a little busy, Sarah," Adrian snapped. "The video is out," Sarah said. "The woman from the plane, Mrs. O'Malley. She must have airdropped it to someone or uploaded it immediately. It's on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. It has 10 million views in 40 minutes. They're calling it the slap heard around the world." Adrian swiped to his news feed. There it was, a shaky but high-definition video. The audio was crisp, Beatrice's sneering voice asking who Nadia slept with, the shove, and then the slap. It was brutal to watch. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Boycott Cloudwing was trending #1 globally. Fire Beatrice was #2. Justice for Nadia was #3, The stock is plummeting, Sarah continued. Down 12% in after-hours trading. The board is panicking. They want to issue a statement. No statement, Adrian said coldly. Not yet. I'm coming to the office. Adrian, it's 9 p.m. You need to stay with your wife. My wife is sleeping, Adrian said, looking at Nadia's peaceful form. I'm going to go ensure that the people responsible for hurting her never work in this town again. Meanwhile, in a holding cell at the Queen's County Central booking, Beatrice Gables was huddled on a metal bench. Her pristine uniform was wrinkled. Her mascara ran in dark streaks down her face. She was stripped of her shoes, her belt, and her dignity. She had used her one phone call to reach out to her union representative, a man named Gary, who had saved her job twice before when she had been cited for rudeness. "Gary, you have to get me out," Beatrice had sobbed into the receiver. "It was a setup. She provoked me. The owner, he's crazy." Gary's voice had been cold. "I saw the video, Beatrice. It's edited. It's taken out of context. It shows you slapping a pregnant woman who was asking for water," Gary said flatly. "The union cannot defend this. It's a violent felony assault. We are withdrawing our counsel. You're on your own, Beatrice." The line had gone dead. Beatrice stared at the concrete wall. She was alone. For the first time in her life, her seniority, her connections, and her arrogance couldn't save her. She wasn't the queen of the cabin anymore. She was inmate number 492-1. The boardroom of Cloudwing Airlines was located on the 40th floor of a glass tower in Midtown. It was usually a place of polite handshakes and financial forecasts. Tonight, it felt like an execution chamber. 12 board members sat around the mahogany table. They were old money, men and women who cared about dividends and quarterly reports. They looked nervous. The double doors swung open. Adrian Collins walked in. He didn't greet them. He didn't sit down. He walked to the head of the table and threw a file folder onto the polished wood. It slid across the surface, stopping in front of the VP of Human Resources, a man named Larson. "Open it," Adrian commanded. Larson's hands shook as he opened the folder. "Mr. Collins, we can explain. Read the highlighted email," Adrian said. Larson swallowed hard. He read aloud, his voice trembling. Date, February 14th, 2024. Subject, complaint regarding Beatrice Gables. Body, Mrs. Gables refused to serve my autistic son because he was making too much noise. When I complained, she threatened to have us removed. This is the third complaint of discrimination this month. "And the reply?" Adrian asked. Larson read the reply, written by his own department. "We have investigated and found no wrongdoing. Mrs. Gables is a senior crew member with an exemplary record. Complaint dismissed." Adrian slammed his hand on the table, making the water glasses jump. "Exemplary record?" Adrian roared. "I had my team pull the archived server data. Beatrice Gables has had 42 formal complaints in 10 years. Racism, ageism, ableism, verbal abuse, and every single one was buried by this board because she was efficient and because she managed the high-profile routes well." "We didn't know it was this bad," one board member protested. "You didn't look," Adrian countered. "You created a culture where a flight attendant felt comfortable slapping a passenger because she thought she was untouchable. She thought she owned the plane. And do you know why? Because you let her." Adrian looked at Larson. "You're fired. Get out." "You can't do that." Larson stood up. "I have a contract. I am dissolving the HR department's leadership effective immediately for gross negligence," Adrian said. "If you want to sue me, go ahead. I have more lawyers than you have years left to live. Get out." Larson fled the room. "The rest of you," Adrian turned to the board. "You have two choices. You can resign tonight, with your stock options intact, or you can stay and I will personally audit every expense report, every business trip, and every decision you have made in the last 5 years. And if I find 1 cent out of place, I will destroy you." By morning, 5 board members had resigned, but the karma for Beatrice was just beginning. 3 days later, Beatrice was released on bail. She had to put up her condo in Queens as collateral. She walked out of the precinct, expecting to hail a cab and go home to hide. Instead, she walked into a wall of flash bulbs. The paparazzi were waiting. So were the protesters. A crowd of 50 people stood behind barricades holding signs. "Justice for Nadia. Racism has no place in the sky, and shame on Beatrice." "Beatrice! Beatrice! Did you know she was the owner's wife?" a reporter shouted. "Beatrice, do you hate black women?" "Beatrice, look this way." She covered her face, pushing through the crowd. Someone threw a cup of water at her. Poetic justice that was not lost on the crowd. It soaked her hair, cold and shocking. "How does it feel?" a woman in the crowd screamed. "You wouldn't give her water, now you can have some." Beatrice finally made it to a taxi, but the driver looked at her through the rearview mirror. He was an older man with kind eyes. He saw who she was. "Get out," the driver said. "What?" Beatrice gasped. "I just want to go home." "I saw the video," the driver said. "My daughter is pregnant. If someone did that to her. I don't drive people like you. Get out." She was forced to walk 6 blocks to the subway, followed by cameras the entire way. When she finally got home, she found an envelope taped to her door. It wasn't a welcome home card. It was a lawsuit. Collins Holdings vs. Beatrice Gables. Civil suit for damages. $10,000. Counts: assault, battery, emotional distress, defamation of character. And beneath that, a letter from her landlord. Notice of eviction, violation of building conduct clause, criminal activity on or off premises that brings disrepute to the building. She had lost her job. She had lost her reputation. She was losing her home. And she was facing a $10 million lawsuit from a man who had the resources to pursue it until the end of time. Beatrice sat on her floor, the eviction notice in her hand, and finally, she cried. Not for Nadia, not for the baby, but for herself. She realized with a terrifying clarity that her life as she knew it was over. She had slapped the one woman in the world who could hit back with the force of a hurricane. But Adrian wasn't done. He didn't just want her ruined. He wanted to make sure she served as a warning to every other person who thought a uniform gave them the right to hate. He ordered his legal team to find the other 42 people Beatrice had abused over the years. He was going to turn the civil suit into a class action lawsuit. He was going to give every single victim a voice, and he was going to make Beatrice listen to every single one of them in court. The air inside the Queens County Supreme Court was heavy, smelling of floor wax and stale anxiety. For 6 grueling months, the trial of the people versus Beatrice Gables, running concurrently with the massive civil class action suit Collins et al. Versus Gables, had captivated the city. Now it was finally drawing to a close. Beatrice sat at the mahogany defense table, but she looked nothing like the imperious woman who had ruled the first-class cabin with an iron fist. The transformation was startling. She looked 20 years older, her posture collapsed inward, as if she were trying to disappear into her own skeleton. Her hair, once dyed a fierce, aggressive shade of crimson, was now a dull, straw-like grey, pulled back with a cheap rubber band. She wore a polyester suit she had found at a Goodwill in Astoria, ill-fitting at the shoulders and tight at the waist because her assets had been frozen since the 2nd week of the investigation. Her high-powered defense attorney, provided by the Airline union, had abandoned her months ago. Beside her now sat a public defender named Mr. Klein, a man with coffee stains on his tie and a look of perpetual exhaustion. He shuffled papers with a resignation that told Beatrice everything she needed to know. There was no winning this. The trial had been a parade of humiliation, a systematic dismantling of Beatrice's ego. Adrian Collins had kept his promise. He hadn't just brought Nadia to the stand. He had funded the travel and legal expenses for every single person Beatrice had ever wronged. The jury had listened, rapt and horrified, as the ghosts of Beatrice's past took the stand, one by one. There was Mrs. Higgins, a 70-year-old grandmother who trembled as she recounted how Beatrice had made her cry over a request for herbal tea, mocking her shaking hands until the elderly woman spilled the hot liquid on herself. There was David, a young man with cerebral palsy. He testified through a tablet device, explaining how Beatrice had accused him of being drunk and disorderly because of his speech impediment, threatening to have him arrested if he didn't stop making noises. There was the mother of an autistic child clutching a photograph of her son, weeping as she described Beatrice trying to kick them off a flight because the child was rocking back and forth during a delay. With every testimony, the atmosphere in the room grew colder toward the defendant. Beatrice wasn't just revealed as a strict flight attendant. She was exposed as a predator who had used her badge and her uniform as weapons against the vulnerable. Then it was Nadia's turn. When the doors opened and Nadia Collins entered, the murmuring gallery fell silent. She walked to the witness stand with a grace that seemed to light up the drab courtroom. She looked healthy, radiant, and undeniably powerful. Beatrice couldn't meet her eyes. She stared at the grain of the wood on the table, her hands shaking in her lap. "Mrs. Collins," the district attorney asked gently, "can you tell the court how that interaction made you feel?" Nadia paused, her hand resting instinctively on her heart. She looked out at the jury, her expression open and vulnerable. "She tried to make me feel small," Nadia said, her voice clear and steady, reaching every corner of the room. She looked at me, at my clothes, at my skin, at my fatigue, and she decided I didn't matter. She decided I was a trespasser in a space I had paid to be in. It wasn't just about the water. It was about power. She wanted to remind me that she held the authority and I held nothing. And when she realized she was wrong, when she realized she couldn't bully me into submission, she resorted to violence. Nadia turned her gaze toward Beatrice. For the first time, Beatrice looked up. She expected to see rage. She expected fire. Instead, she saw a profound, devastating pity. "I don't hate her," Nadia continued softly. "I pity her, because she lived her life thinking that bringing others down was the only way to lift herself up." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. It was a formality. When they returned, the foreman stood up, avoiding Beatrice's desperate gaze. "We find the defendant, Beatrice Gables, guilty on all counts," he read. "Assault in the 2nd degree, battery, reckless endangerment, harassment in the 1st degree." A gasp rippled through the courtroom, not of shock, but of release. Justice Holloway, a stern woman with steel-grey hair and zero tolerance for theatrics, peered over her reading glasses at Beatrice. The judge's name was a coincidence that the tabloids had loved, pointing out the irony that a Judge Holloway would finish what Captain Holloway had started. "Ms. Gables," the judge said, her voice dry and cutting, "you held a position of trust and safety in the skies. You were responsible for the well-being of thousands of people. Instead, you violated that trust in the most egregious way possible. You didn't just slap a passenger, you slapped the very concept of human dignity." I was just following protocol," Beatrice whispered, the lie slipping out one last time, a desperate reflex. "You were following your own prejudice," Judge Halloway snapped. "I am sentencing you to 3 years in a state correctional facility, followed by 5 years of probation." Beatrice let out a strangled sob, her hands flying to her mouth. "Jail? For a slap?" "For the pattern of abuse," the judge corrected, slamming her gavel. "And regarding the civil suit, since you have no assets left after your legal fees, the court orders that your future wages be garnished by 40% for the next 20 years to pay restitution to the 43 victims named in this suit. You will pay for your cruelty, Miss Gables, quite literally, for the rest of your working life." Beatrice was led away in handcuffs, weeping uncontrollably. But this time there were no cameras waiting for her. The world had already moved on. The viral video was old news. She was no longer a villain worth clicking on. She was just a cautionary tale, fading into the dark. 2 years later, JFK International Airport was bustling with the frantic, joyful energy of the holiday rush. Terminal 4 had been completely renovated, transforming from a sterile hallway into a luxurious concourse of glass and light. Cloudwing Airlines was no longer the scandal-ridden carrier it had been. Under Adrian Collins's direct supervision, it had been rebranded and rebuilt. It was now rated the #1 airline in the world for customer service. They had implemented the Nadia Protocol, a mandatory, rigorous training program focused on de-escalation, unconscious bias, and empathy. The culture of arrogance had been scrubbed away, replaced by a culture of service. Adrian Collins walked through the terminal, pushing a sleek stroller. Inside, a chubby-cheeked toddler named Ethan giggled, clutching a plush toy airplane. Beside them walked Nadia. She looked stunning in a tailored cream-colored coat that brushed her calves, her hair flowing free in loose curls. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was the COO of the Collins Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing legal representation for women who had been wrongfully terminated or discriminated against. They approached the first-class check-in. The agent behind the desk didn't sneer. She didn't assess Nadia's worth based on her comfort wear. She smiled warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Collins," the agent said. "And hello, little Ethan. We have your seats ready for London. Can I get you some water before you board?" Nadia smiled, the memory of that terrible day, feeling like it belonged to a different lifetime, a different person. "That would be lovely, thank you." "Right this way," the agent said, gesturing toward the exclusive VIP lounge. As the family walked toward the frosted glass doors of the lounge, they had to navigate around a wet floor sign. A member of the cleaning staff was working there, pushing a heavy rusted cart filled with trash bags and industrial solvents. The cleaner was wearing a shapeless grey jumpsuit that swallowed her figure. She was hunched over, scrubbing a stubborn coffee stain off the pristine white tiles, her back arching in a spasm of pain. The cleaner paused to dip her rag into the bucket of grey, soapy water. She looked up as the Collins family passed. It was Beatrice. She had been released early for good behaviour and overcrowding, but her felony record was a shackle she couldn't break. She was blacklisted from every customer-facing job in New York. No retail store, no reception desk, and certainly no airline would touch her. The only work she could find was with a third-party janitorial contractor, assigned to the very terminal she used to rule like a queen. Beatrice froze. Her hands, red and chapped from the harsh chemicals, hovered over the bucket. She saw the designer coat. She saw the handsome, protective husband. She saw the beautiful, happy child. She saw the life she had tried to ruin, thriving in spite of her. She looked up, and for a heartbeat, her eyes locked with Nadia's. Beatrice's hair was completely white now, unkempt and frizzy. The arrogance that had once defined her was gone, replaced by a hollow, broken defeat. In that second, Beatrice braced herself. She waited for the insult. She waited for Nadia to mock her, to laugh, to point her out to the security guards, or to make a scene. She waited for the karma she knew she deserved to deliver one final blow. But Nadia simply stopped. She looked down at the woman scrubbing the floor. There was no hate in Nadia's eyes. There was no triumph. There was only a quiet, unshakable peace. She looked at Beatrice not as an enemy, but as a ghost. Something transparent, powerless, and ultimately irrelevant. Nadia didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her happiness was the loudest statement she could make. Nadia turned to Adrian, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. "Ready to go?" "Ready," Adrian said. He didn't even glance at the cleaner. To him, she was part of the background, no more significant than the floor tiles. "London awaits." They walked away, the glass doors of the first-class lounge sliding open to welcome them into a world of comfort and respect. Beatrice was left alone in the busy terminal. Thousands of travelers walked around her, stepping over her wet floor sign, ignoring her completely. To them, she wasn't a person with a history or a name. She was just the help. She was invisible. A tear leaked out of Beatrice's eye, tracking through the grime on her cheek. She looked down at the dirty floor, dipped her rag back into the murky water, and continued to scrub. She was exactly where she belonged. And that is the story of how one act of cruelty led to a complete empire crumbling for an arrogant flight attendant, and a new beginning for the woman she tried to shame. It's a powerful reminder that you never truly know who you are talking to, and that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost you everything. Beatrice thought her uniform gave her the power to judge, but in the end, the only judgment that mattered was the one delivered by karma. What would you have done if you were in Nadia's shoes? Would you have forgiven Beatrice, or did she deserve even worse? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice and twists, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.